You have been ruled by your emotions your entire life, and you called it being human. Every time anger made you say something you regretted, you blamed the heat of the moment. Every time fear stopped you from taking action, you called it being cautious. Every time sadness paralyzed you for days, you told yourself you were processing. But here is the truth that Niccolò Machiavelli understood 500 years ago. Your emotions are not you. They are chemical reactions designed for survival in a world that no longer exists. And the person who learns to observe emotions without being controlled by them becomes more powerful than everyone around them combined. Tonight you learn 7 secrets that feel illegal to know, not because they are immoral, but because they give you an advantage so profound that most people will never understand how you operate. These are the methods Machiavelli observed in the most powerful leaders of Renaissance Italy, the princes who never lost their composure, the generals who made calculated decisions while others panicked, the advisors who influenced kingdoms without ever raising their voice. By the end of this, you will understand how to become emotionless, not by suppressing feelings, but by transcending them entirely. And once you master this, no one will ever manipulate you again. The first secret is understanding that emotions are information, not instructions. Most people experience an emotion and immediately obey it. They feel angry, so they lash out. They feel sad, so they withdraw. They feel afraid, so they avoid. This is operating like an animal. Stimulus triggers emotion. Emotion triggers action. No thought in between. Machiavelli studied leaders who broke this chain. They felt the same emotions as everyone else. The difference was they inserted a pause between feeling and action. In that pause, they asked one question. Is this emotion giving me useful information, or is it trying to control me? When you feel anger, the emotion is giving you information. Someone crossed a boundary. Something violated your values, a threat has appeared. This information is useful, but the anger itself is not telling you the correct response. It is screaming at you to attack immediately, to defend, to destroy. If you obey this instruction, you often make things worse. The emotionless response is different. You feel the anger, you extract the information. Someone crossed a boundary. Then you decide the strategic response independent of the emotion. Maybe the strategic response is to address it calmly. Maybe it is to document and plan. Maybe it is to cut them off completely without explanation. The response is chosen by your rational mind using the information the emotion provided. But the emotion does not get to make the decision. Practice this with every emotion you feel today. When fear appears, do not let it stop you. Ask what information it is providing. Is there real danger, or is this just unfamiliarity? When sadness comes, do not let it paralyze you. Ask what it is telling you. Is something genuinely wrong, or are you just tired and interpreting everything negatively? Extract information from every emotion. Then make decisions independent of the emotional state. This separation is the foundation of becoming emotionless. You still feel everything, but feelings become data instead of commands. Within weeks of practicing this, you will notice something incredible. Emotions lose their grip on you. They still arise, but they no longer control your behavior. You become the observer of your emotional weather instead of the victim of it. People will notice you do not react the way you used to. They will try harder to provoke you and find that nothing works. You have become unreachable through emotional manipulation because you have separated feeling from action. This is the first secret, and it changes everything that follows. The second secret is deliberate exposure to emotional triggers until they lose power. Machiavelli observed that soldiers who had seen battle remained calm in situations that made civilians panic. The soldier had been exposed to extreme fear so many times that his system adapted. Fear still registered, but it no longer controlled him. You can engineer this same adaptation for every emotion. The method is systematic desensitization. You identify what triggers your strongest emotional reactions. Then you expose yourself to smaller versions of those triggers repeatedly until your system stops responding with intensity. If criticism devastates you, you actively seek mild criticism. You ask for feedback. You post opinions online. You put yourself in situations where people will disagree with you. Each exposure teaches your nervous system that criticism is not a threat. The emotional intensity decreases with each repetition. If rejection terrifies you, you create situations where rejection is likely. You approach people who will probably say no. You apply for things you are not qualified for. You ask questions that might get dismissed. Each rejection proves to your system that it is survivable. The fear loses its power. If conflict makes you anxious, you start small conflicts deliberately. You disagree with someone when you normally would not. You set a boundary you would normally avoid setting. You say no when you want to say no, instead of people-pleasing. Each small conflict that you survive reduces your fear of the next one. This is not about becoming numb. This is about building emotional resilience through exposure. An athlete trains muscles by stressing them repeatedly. You train emotional control by exposing yourself to triggers repeatedly. The key is controlling the exposure. You start with low-stakes situations where the consequences are minimal. You do not jump into the deep end. You wade in gradually, building tolerance as you go. Most people avoid their emotional triggers their entire lives. This keeps the triggers powerful. The thing you avoid grows in your mind until it controls you completely. But the thing you face repeatedly shrinks. It loses the power to move you. Within months of systematic exposure, situations that used to wreck you emotionally barely register. Someone criticizes you, and you feel a small ping of discomfort that passes in seconds instead of ruining your week. Someone rejects you, and you shrug and move to the next opportunity instead of spiraling into self-doubt. Someone creates conflict, and you handle it efficiently instead of losing sleep over it. You have not become heartless. You have become anti-fragile. Your emotional system has adapted to handle stress without breaking. This is the second secret. Engineer your exposure. Build your tolerance. Watch your emotional reactions shrink until they are background noise instead of controlling forces. The third secret is the kill switch. This is a technique Machiavelli saw in advisors who remained composed during executions, betrayals, and political collapses. They had developed the ability to shut down emotional processing entirely when necessary, not permanently, but temporarily when a situation required pure logic. The kill switch is a mental trigger you create through association and practice. You choose a physical anchor. It could be pressing your thumb and finger together. It could be taking 3 specific breaths. It could be tensing and releasing a muscle group. The specific action does not matter. What matters is that you pair this physical action with emotional shutdown repeatedly until they become linked. Here is how you build it. Find a quiet moment when you are emotionally neutral. Perform your chosen physical action. While performing it, visualize your emotions as a volume dial. See yourself turning the volume down to 0. Feel your body becoming calm and neutral, your mind becoming clear and analytical. Repeat this pairing 20 times. Physical action plus visualization of emotional shutdown. Do this daily for 2 weeks. Your nervous system learns the association. Physical action equals emotional neutrality. Once the association is built, you test it in low-stakes emotional situations. You feel annoyance rising. You trigger the kill switch. The annoyance decreases noticeably. You feel anxiety before a meeting. You trigger the kill switch. The anxiety reduces to manageable levels. With practice, the kill switch becomes incredibly powerful. You can go from emotional activation to complete neutrality in seconds. This is not suppression where you push the emotion down and it builds pressure. This is temporary shutdown where you turn off emotional processing to handle a situation, then turn it back on later. Use the kill switch in negotiations where emotion would cost you money. Use it in conflicts where anger would make you say something destructive. Use it in moments of grief where you need to function despite the pain. Use it anytime emotional processing would interfere with optimal performance. The important part is not staying in kill switch mode permanently. After the situation is handled, you release the switch, you let emotions come back, you process what you felt. But during the critical moment, you had complete control. People who have never developed a kill switch are slaves to their emotional timing. They feel something and must deal with it immediately, regardless of whether the timing is strategic. But people with a kill switch choose when to feel and when to function. They can walk through emotional minefields without detonating because they have turned off their sensitivity temporarily. This is the third secret. Build your kill switch. Practice it until it is automatic, then use it to operate effectively in situations where others are controlled by their reactions. The fourth secret is emotional redirection. This is more advanced than simply observing emotions. This is learning to channel emotional energy into useful action rather than destructive reaction. Machiavelli watched generals take the rage of defeat and transform it into fuel for the next battle. He saw politicians convert fear of losing power into strategic action that secured their position. They were not suppressing the emotion, they were redirecting its energy. Every emotion carries energy. Anger is high energy. Fear is activating energy. Sadness is heavy energy. Most people let these energies dissipate through reaction. They yell and the anger energy is wasted. They freeze and the fear energy is wasted. They collapse and the sadness energy is wasted. The emotionless operator captures this energy and redirects it. When you feel anger, you recognize it as activation energy. Instead of yelling, you redirect it into intense, productive work. You take that fire and pour it into your project, into your workout, into problem solving. The anger gets transformed into progress. When you feel fear, you recognize it as alertness energy. Instead of freezing, you redirect it into preparation. You take that heightened state and use it to plan, to research, to strategize. The fear gets transformed into readiness. When you feel sadness, you recognize it as depth energy. Instead of collapsing, you redirect it into creation. You take that heaviness and pour it into writing, art, or deep thinking. The sadness gets transformed into meaning. This redirection serves two purposes. First, it prevents the emotion from controlling your behavior destructively. Second, it uses the emotional energy productively instead of wasting it. You are not fighting your emotions. You are riding them like a surfer rides a wave. The technique is simple but requires practice. When strong emotion hits, you immediately engage in intense physical or mental activity that matches the energy level of the emotion. Anger gets redirected into heavy lifting, sprinting, or aggressive problem solving. Fear gets redirected into detailed planning or skill practice. Sadness gets redirected into reflective writing or meaningful work. The emotion does not go away, but its energy flows into the activity instead of into destructive reaction. Over time, your system learns this pattern. Emotional energy becomes fuel instead of disturbance. You start to welcome strong emotions because you know you can convert them into progress. People operating without this skill are terrified of their own emotions. They avoid situations that might trigger feelings because feelings make them dysfunctional. But people who have mastered redirection seek emotional intensity because they know how to harvest its power. This is the fourth secret. Do not suppress emotional energy. Do not waste it on reaction. Capture it and redirect it into action that moves your life forward. The fifth secret is the practice of premeditation of adversity. This was a Stoic technique that Machiavelli observed in leaders who never seemed surprised or overwhelmed by disaster. They had mentally rehearsed every possible negative outcome before it happened. When it actually occurred, they experienced minimal emotional impact because they had already processed it mentally. You implement this by spending time each week imagining worst-case scenarios in vivid detail, not in an anxious way, in a systematic way. What is the worst that could happen in your career? Imagine getting fired. Imagine your business failing. Imagine public humiliation. See it clearly. Feel the initial emotional response. Then imagine yourself handling it, surviving it, rebuilding from it. What is the worst that could happen in your relationships? Imagine betrayal. Imagine abandonment. Imagine rejection. See it clearly. Feel it. Then imagine yourself continuing, surviving, finding new connections. What is the worst that could happen to your health? Imagine injury. Imagine illness. Imagine loss of capability. See it clearly. Feel it. Then imagine yourself adapting, continuing, finding meaning despite limitation. This practice does two things. First, it removes the shock factor from negative events. When something bad actually happens, your system has already encountered this scenario mentally. The emotional impact is much smaller because it is familiar instead of unprecedented. Second, it builds confidence in your ability to handle adversity. You have mentally rehearsed survival. You know you can continue even if the worst happens. This knowledge reduces fear dramatically. Most people avoid thinking about worst-case scenarios. This keeps them emotionally fragile. They are unprepared for adversity. When something bad happens, the shock alone is devastating. But the person who practices premeditation is emotionally prepared for anything. They have already sat with the fear of loss. They have already imagined disaster. They have already seen themselves surviving. When actual adversity arrives, they respond with eerie calmness that others cannot understand. They are not in shock. They are not devastated. They are not panicking. They are implementing the response they already rehearsed mentally. This practice feels dark at first. It feels like inviting negativity. But it is the opposite. It is building emotional armor through mental preparation. The soldier who trains for combat before deployment survives better than the soldier who avoids thinking about violence until bullets fly. You are training for emotional combat through premeditation. Spend 30 minutes each week sitting with worst-case scenarios. Imagine them vividly. Process the emotional response. Then imagine your survival and continuation. This practice alone will make you more emotionally resilient than 90% of people. This is the fifth secret. Prepare for adversity mentally before it arrives physically. Remove the power of shock through premeditation. The sixth secret is strategic emotional display. This is the most Machiavellian technique because it involves showing emotions you are not actually feeling to achieve specific outcomes. Machiavelli watched princes who appeared angry to intimidate but felt nothing. He saw advisors who appeared sympathetic to gain trust but were calculating every word. These leaders understood that displaying the right emotion at the right time was a tool of influence. True emotionlessness is not never displaying emotion. It is displaying emotion strategically while remaining internally neutral. You feel nothing, but you show exactly what serves your purpose. When you want to establish a boundary firmly, you display controlled anger, even if you feel neutral. The display communicates seriousness and consequence. When you want to build connection quickly, you display warmth and enthusiasm, even if you feel analytical. The display creates comfort and trust. When you want someone to underestimate you, you display nervousness or confusion, even if you feel confident. The display lowers their guard. This is not manipulation in a negative sense. This is communication. You are using emotional display as a language to convey strategic messages. The key is that you are choosing the display consciously, rather than being controlled by whatever you actually feel. To develop this skill, you practice displaying emotions on command. Stand in front of a mirror and show anger without feeling it. Show sadness, show joy, show fear. Practice until you can create convincing emotional displays at will. Then practice maintaining internal neutrality while displaying the emotion. You show anger in your face and voice, while your mind remains completely calm and analytical. You show enthusiasm outwardly, while internally you are observing and calculating. This split between internal state and external display gives you incredible power. People respond to what you show them. If you show them exactly what will produce your desired outcome while remaining internally unaffected, you control the interaction completely. Most people cannot separate their internal state from their external display. What they feel is what they show. This makes them readable and manipulable. But the person who can show anything while feeling nothing is unreadable and in control. Use this carefully. Display emotions that serve your strategic purpose. Remain internally neutral regardless of what you show. Never let your actual feelings leak through if they would undermine your objective. This is the sixth secret. Master emotional display as a tool while maintaining emotional neutrality as your internal state. Become an actor who never breaks character but never believes the role. The seventh secret is building an identity independent of emotional states. This is the deepest work and the ultimate foundation of emotionlessness. Most people's sense of self is tied to their emotions. When they feel confident, they believe they are confident. When they feel afraid, they believe they are afraid. Their identity shifts with their emotional weather. This makes them unstable and controllable. Machiavelli observed leaders whose sense of self was completely independent of how they felt in any given moment. They had built an identity based on principles, roles, and commitments rather than feelings. When they felt afraid but their role required courage, they acted courageously despite the fear. When they felt merciful but their principles required justice, they executed justice despite the feeling. Their behavior was determined by identity, not emotion. You build this by defining yourself through commitments rather than feelings. I am someone who keeps my word, not I keep my word when I feel like it. I am someone who faces challenges directly, not I face challenges when I feel brave. I am someone who maintains boundaries, not I maintain boundaries when I feel strong enough. These identity statements become rules that govern behavior regardless of emotional state. When your identity says you are someone who keeps commitments, you keep them even when you feel tired, discouraged, or unmotivated. The feeling does not matter. The identity determines the action. When your identity says you are someone who speaks truth, you speak truth even when you feel afraid of consequences. The fear is irrelevant to what you do. Build your identity carefully. Choose the principles and roles that define who you are. Write them down. Review them daily. Then act from them regardless of how you feel. Over time, your sense of self becomes stable. It does not shift with your mood. You know who you are independent of your emotional state. This creates unshakable presence. People sense that you are the same person in every situation. They cannot manipulate you through emotional appeals because your actions come from identity, not feelings. This is the deepest form of emotionlessness. You still feel everything, but your feelings no longer define you or control you. They are weather passing through. Your identity is the mountain that does not move regardless of the storm. This is the seventh secret. Build an identity based on principles and roles. Act from that identity regardless of emotional state. Become someone whose behavior is predictable, not because you are rigid, but because you are principled. You now possess 7 secrets that most people will never understand. Emotions are information, not instructions. Systematic exposure builds resilience. The kill switch provides temporary shutdown. Redirection transforms emotional energy into progress. Premeditation removes the shock of adversity. Strategic display uses emotion as a tool. Identity-based action transcends emotional control. These secrets feel illegal because they break the social contract that says we must be ruled by our feelings. Society wants you emotional because emotional people are controllable. They can be provoked into stupid decisions. They can be manipulated through fear. They can be distracted by outrage. They can be paralyzed by sadness. But the person who has mastered these 7 secrets cannot be controlled through emotion. They feel everything but are moved by nothing they do not choose to be moved by. They observe their emotions like weather. They expose themselves to triggers until triggers lose power. They can shut down emotional processing when necessary. They redirect emotional energy into productive action. They have mentally prepared for every adversity. They display emotion strategically while remaining internally neutral, and they act from identity rather than feeling. This combination creates someone operating on a completely different level than everyone around them. While others are reactive, you are strategic. While others are controlled by their feelings, you are guided by your principles. While others are readable, you are mysterious. While others are manipulable, you are untouchable. The transformation is not instant. Each secret requires practice, but the practice is worth it because the result is freedom. Freedom from being controlled by your own emotions. Freedom from being manipulated through emotional appeals. Freedom from the tyranny of feelings that change like weather. You become the calm center in every storm. The person who others look to when everything is falling apart because you do not fall apart. The one who makes clear decisions when everyone else is panicking because you are not panicking. The leader who others follow because you demonstrate that emotions can be mastered rather than obeyed. Start today with the first secret. Begin treating emotions as information rather than instructions. Feel something and pause before acting. Ask what information this emotion provides. Then decide your action strategically. Practice this until it becomes automatic. Then add the second secret. Identify your biggest emotional triggers and create small exposures to them. Build your tolerance systematically. Then implement the third secret. Build your kill switch through repetition until you can achieve neutrality on demand. Then the fourth. Learn to redirect emotional energy into productive channels. Then the fifth. Practice premeditation of adversity weekly. Then the sixth. Develop your ability to display emotions strategically. And finally, the seventh. Build an identity based on principles that governs behavior regardless of how you feel. Each secret builds on the previous ones. Each makes you more emotionally independent. Each increases your power. Within 6 months of practicing these 7 secrets, you will be unrecognizable to people who knew you before. They will comment that nothing seems to bother you anymore, that you never lose your composure, that you seem to operate with clarity they cannot understand. They will not know about these 7 secrets. They will not understand that you have trained yourself systematically to transcend emotional control, and you do not need to explain it to them. Let them wonder. Let them be mystified. Let them respect what they cannot comprehend. You have become emotionless, not by killing your capacity to feel, but by mastering your relationship with feeling. You are not cold. You are controlled. You are not heartless. You are strategic. You are not broken. You are free. This is Machiavellian mastery applied to internal state. This is power at its purest form. The power to feel everything and be controlled by nothing. Your transformation begins now.